Hello, this is Ramon Rivas, and I want to welcome you to our map2equity.com real estate tip for today. Today, I want to show you the biggest reason why all real estate professionals are using Xima USA. I'm going to unveil the power of Xima USA for you in this short video. So we're going to be talking about equity. How does Xima determine equity? Xima determines the equity by looking at the market value of a property. Now, the market value is determined by the median sold price of properties sold within the last 12 months in the neighborhood of the subject property. So we go half a mile radius around that property, and we look for the properties which size is approximately plus minus 10% the square footage of the subject property. We gather all that information and we calculate the median sold price. That's how we achieve market value for a property. Let me give you the definition of market value for Xima USA. Market value of a property is determined by the median sold price of properties that actually sold within the last 12 months in the neighborhood with a half a mile radius from the subject property, and which size is approximately plus minus 10% the square footage of the subject property. These guidelines and criteria can be changed by the user, but the system will go and calculate market value on every single property within the county of your choice upfront and store this information in a database. This database is refreshed every single week for you so that all the market values that you have within the system are going to be fresh and new. There's another type of value that we calculate for properties, and it's what we call the active value. The active value of a property is determined by the median listing price of properties for sale in the neighborhood. We again go half a mile radius and we look for properties that have plus minus 10% the square footage of the subject property. So the main difference between market value and active value is the market value is calculated with respect to the median sold price of properties that sold, and active value is calculated with respect to the median listing price of properties for sale, actively for sale. So those are active listings that real estate agents have put in the market. Now that we know the difference between the active value and the market value, I want to show you the different types of search by equity that you could do by using Xima USA. The first one is what we call the debt equity search. The debt equity search is the gap or percentage that exists between the property's total known debt and its market value. So we know how much the property owners owe on that property, and we know how much the property is worth. The gap in between those two is going to be our debt equity. We also have the potential equity. The potential equity would be the gap between the property's listing price and its market value. So whenever properties are active on the market, they're listed by a real estate agent, they have a listing price. We take that listing price and we take the market value that has been calculated by the system. The gap in between those two numbers is what we call potential equity. And the last type of equity that you can search by using Xima USA is the active equity. The active equity is the gap between the property's listing price and its active value. So now instead of talking about market value, we're talking about active value. And as you can see, both potential equity and active equity are equities that are calculated with respect to listing price of a property. So if the property is not listed for sale, Xima USA will not have a potential equity or an active equity number. Now let me show you the actual formulas that we use to calculate these types of equity. So the search by equity formulas are as follows. We calculate debt equity by multiplying 100% by the difference between the market value and the total amount of debt divided by its market value. Then to calculate potential equity, what we do is we multiply 100% by the difference between market value and listing price, and we divide it by the market value so that we can get a percentage number. And to calculate active equity, we multiply 100% by the difference between the active value and the listing price of the property, and we divide it by the property's active value. That's how we calculate all three different equities for you. And even though this is done automatically by the system for you, we want you to know how it works so that you can effectively use the different search by equity formulas when looking for a specific property or when doing a specific search. The next thing that I want to show you is a few examples, or one example of each and every single one of the calculations for the equities. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that we found a property where the total debt is $105,000. That's how much they owe on that property, including all their liens and all their debt. Then the system has calculated already market value at $200,000. We also have the listing price because the property is active on the market. I want to show you all the types of equity. So we're going to talk about a property that is listed, and in this case is listed for $120,000. We also have an active value that was calculated by the system, and this active value is $210,000. So if I wanted to calculate my debt equity, I would go and do 100% times $200,000, which is the property's market value, minus $105,000, and I divide it by $200,000, which is the property's market value, and it tells me that this property has a 47.5 debt to equity ratio. Now if I wanted to calculate the potential equity, I would go ahead and multiply 100% times the property's market value, which is $200,000, minus the property's listing price in this case, which is $120,000, and I divide it by $200,000, I get approximately a 40% potential equity ratio, meaning that in between the listing price of this property, $120,000, and the market value, $200,000, there is a 40% gap. And the last type of equity would be the active equity, and I would calculate it by multiplying 100% times $210,000, which is the property's active value, minus $120,000, which is the listing price, and I divide that by the active value, which is $210,000. It tells me that this property has a 42.86 active equity ratio. So as you can see in this case, none of these three equities are equal. They're all different. If we go based on what they owe against to what the property is worth, there is more equity than if we go against what they're listing it for and what the property is worth. And if we go against what the listings are selling for, listings are selling a little bit higher now than what the property's market value came to, so we have a little bit more of equity as well. And we give you all these three numbers so that you can make the absolute best decision whenever analyzing a property. The best thing about it is that the system will do all these calculations for you. You do need to know what they are for so that you can use them in a powerful way, but the system will take care of calculating it all for you. All you have to do is go into the system and look for those properties. So that's all for today's tip. I hope you are walking away with a good understanding on how to use the different type of search by equity features that we have within Xima USA. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you soon in our next map2equity.com real estate tip of the day. Thank you very much and have an outstanding day.